Hi, everybody, and welcome to Chee-Tash. I'm your host, Chris Lazar, and we are in the discussion for pages 97 through 117 of logotherapy in a nutshell. So these were the challenge questions that I put in the description of every video. And these are just meant questions that I had that arise, make kind of things to make you think about some of the stuff that we were just reading. And this was the beginning, the very start of chapter 2, logotherapy in a nutshell. So we just had a couple questions. And hey, guys, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the comments and start a conversation around it if you wanted to add to this or you have your own interpretation to some of these questions. Let's begin with the first one here. Do you think there is an overfocus on psychoanalysis today? And I was interested in this because it seemed like in various parts of chapter 2, Victor's kind of critical of psychoanalysis in some ways. This was the theory of psychology that stemmed from Sigmund Freud. And he kind of gives like a little bit of a background in saying what the difference is between logotherapy and psychoanalysis. And remember, he starts off with this story. Somebody's asking him a question like, "Oh, are you a doctor? Oh, are you a psychoanalyst?" And the guy, and Victor says, "No, I practice in logotherapy." And so the guy, he asked the guy like, "Well, what is your definition of, what is psychoanalysis?" And the guy gives him this definition of psychoanalysis where you lie down on a couch and you tell things to the therapist which are very disagreeable to tell. And Victor says, well, logotherapy is where you're sitting upright, erect, and you must hear things which are sometimes disagreeable to hear. So think about like psychoanalysis just seems like every stereotypical picture of like a psych doctor, right? You're in a room, guy's in a suit, he's got a clipboard, you're lying down on a couch, just explaining thoughts. And that's kind of what I have been a part. I've done some therapy sessions, and that's what I've experienced too in the 2 that I've done. That's kind of what it is. You're exposing your thoughts to them, and they kind of give you their feedback on what you're thinking. They ask you questions, yada, 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 right? And so you're looking at the past. Victor says that logotherapy is something that it's less retrospective and less introspective. I think this was a mistake that I made. I think I said something about logotherapy being psychoanalysis being less retrospective and introspective. He was actually talking about logotherapy here, and it kind of makes sense. Remember, he less focus on the past, more on the future. Let's not dive deep into what happened. Let's get a goal, and let's get some sort of like goal that you are wake up every day and you want to attack and achieve. All right, let's not look at the past. Let's not really do any introspection. Let's look towards the future. And Victor says that logotherapy is centered on a will to meaning, like we have talked about, whereas the Freudian psychology, psychoanalysis is centered on a will to pleasure. What brings you pleasure? A lot of this, I think, stemmed from like sexual pleasures, I believe. So there are 2 different schools of thought here. And Victor seemed kind of critical a little bit of psychoanalysis. And this question of, do you think it's an overfocus today? I don't think so in and of itself. Psychoanalysis in and of itself, I don't think there is a focus on today. However, don't you think that there's a lot of people who psychoanalyze themselves? So maybe the practice and as we'll see on the next slide, the practice and the study of it are maybe not as prevalent, because I have heard of people being very critical of Freud's work. This was a guy who said that, men's, like, conflicts in men's lives stem from their childhood and their, like, sexual inclinations toward their mothers, things like that. I'm not explaining it entirely correctly, but it had something to do with you wanting to have sex with your mother. And there's a lot of people who are critical of that. And because of that, here, I'll just go to the next slide. Because of that, I was reading this story in the New York Times. There we go. This article by Patricia Cohen, Freud is widely taught at universities except in the psychology department. Basically outlines how psych departments have moved away from this theory because there's not as much evidence for it compared to other disciplines of psychology, psychiatry, etc. And there's not as much, I guess, funding or studies being done on it. But other areas of the universities are kind of taking this up. Humanities, English, arts, so it's popping up in other places. Just psychology departments kind of waned. So to say that there's an overfocus of it in the medical field, I don't think so. However, personally, absolutely. There are people who are constantly dwelling on the past, not reflecting, but dwelling, living in it, saying, oh, if I would have done this, or if I could have done that, focusing on the things that are kind of out of your control. And I think this is where Victor gets so critical about psychoanalysis. It seems like you become a victim of these subliminal thoughts and your past. And look, I'm sure that there is more to it than I am explaining here, and that it does help people, right? And people have used it to wide success. Okay. What Victor is saying here, though, I think is you just need to focus on something else. You can't control the controllables. You can't control the past. You should be looking to the future. But again, and this is maybe why this is so prevalent today, again, not psychoanalysis itself, but this focus on your past, on other things that you can't control, other people, Looking to the future is difficult because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't have access to that data. The past is easy. It's there. You have the summary of it. You have the footage of it, the game film. So it's hard. I think that's where it's over focused today, where it's very prevalent. And you just got to remember, you got to move forward, not backward. Let's continue on. Why do you think the results of the survey between Europeans and Americans is the way it is? If we did the same survey today, would it be different? So this, of course, is talking about the survey on page 106 of my copy. The section, the existential vacuum. And Victor lays out this survey that was done among European students. 25% showed a more or less marked degree of existential vacuum. Among my American students, it was not 25, but 60%. So what was the existential vacuum again? This was where you are left, there's an empty void in you of what you should be doing, or what you basically don't know your purpose in life, kind of. Like, you don't have a meaning in life, so it's leaving this vacuum, existential vacuum. You're wondering what to do because other things are taken care of, whereas in the past they weren't. Food, shelter, etc. And so the question, why are the results the way they are? And I don't know if I'm overthinking about this, but I put here that, Europe encompasses so many different countries that vary socially and economically. So you have a lot of powerhouse economies. The UK, Germany, Switzerland, France, like the big countries. Compared to some of the Balkan and Eastern European countries, which are not as well off as if you look at like GDP wise, some of those Eastern European countries are not as high of a GDP, nominal GDP per capita as some of the big players in Europe. So you get some difference amongst all the countries. So maybe if you were to do, what I'm saying here is if you were to do just Eastern Europe, results of the survey might be different comparing Eastern Europe to Western Europe, right? And then the conglomerate results are somewhere in the middle, which is what you get with this 25%. The United States are different across the board, but it's more we're all one country. Whereas not in Europe, there's different cultures. They're just different. But across the United States, we're kind of all one and the same. And yes, there are differences between like Texas and New Hampshire. But the people, we all have some sort of understanding with each other. And I think and this survey I think was taken, it sounds like it was taken post-World War II. So what happened in post-World War II? Well, the U.S. took off. I mean, you can look up numbers and things, but everything that I've heard, listened to, researched, not a lot of research, more heard and listened to, there was the post-war boom. You talk about the baby boomer generation, biggest cohort generation birth, right after the war. There was a lot of economic success. And because of that, like I put here, success breeds complacency. Now, the vacuum increases because as a country, things are starting to get taken care of a lot more, and we have to worry about less things. Job, house, family, etc., etc. So now people are left with just their freedom to choose and left with what kind of legacy they want to leave. Well, that's hard to figure out. So I think maybe that had an effect on this survey. Let me know what you think, though. But as far as this next question, if we did the same survey today, would it be different? And I think it would be different. The results would be more drastic, I think, for both sides of it, both Europe and the United States. But I still think the United States would be higher. But I think you would see more drastic numbers for both places. I think with the dawning of technology, automation, AI, whatever you want to put, all the buzzwords, it has made life easier, more accessible. Things are within reach a lot more, and there's less effort to go out and get stuff, do stuff, look up things. So you're left with more time to be within yourself. And I think people are having to adjust to that, and it's a hard adjustment. So they are coming to grips with this existential vacuum, I think maybe more so today. So that's what I would say about this question. Let's move on. What is the difference between self-actualization and self-transcendence? This was on page 111, section The Essence of Existence. So Victor writes, what is called self-actualization is not an attainable aim at all, for the simple reason that the more one would strive for it, the more he would miss it, countervailing forces. In other words, self-actualization is possible only as a side effect of self-transcendence. So I had to look this up a little bit, just Googled these terms. Self-actualization, fulfilling your potential. Self-transcendence, fulfilling something that is bigger than yourself, and there's no self-interest in it. So what does this mean? Well, self-actualization is like working towards being the best football player that you can be, best athlete. But you only work out by yourself on your own time. Nobody comes with you. And you're doing it all just to get better. And I don't think this is a bad thing. You should want to get better. And if you work hard enough, you will get better. Now, what self-transcendence is saying, hey, I want to get better, but let's invite the whole team. Let's get the whole team involved in this. Because we all probably have the same goals, conference title, state championship, national championship, whatever it may be. So what Victor was saying in that passage there, through the process of self-transcendence, and how many times have we seen this quote in this book about something being the byproduct of something else? You shouldn't be focusing on this. It's a byproduct of this. You know, we've seen it multiple times. So through that, working with the team, helping the team get better, you get better, self-actualization, and you have a better chance of getting the goals that you set out for. Winning a title, individual goals could come along with that too, absolutely. The more you strive for it, the more you miss it. Again, the law of countervailing forces. Victor has mentioned this a lot in this book. And that comes from, that's not my term, countervailing forces. That comes from James Dines from his book, Mass Psychology, which maybe I should review. It's been a while since I've read that book. Maybe I should review that book someday for you guys. And the last question, what is the difference between psychological and neurological? All right, this was kind of confusing because I almost think they're both kind of the same thing. It was very tough. On page 101, this comes about in the section called existential frustration. So these are just like dictionary terms here off of Google. Psychological, of affecting or arising in the mind, related to the mental and emotional state of a person. Neurological, organization of thoughts, knowledge, and the mind. So it's almost like psychological is the effect, like the result, your emotional state from that is deviated from your mind. Neurological is what goes on before the result happens, how you organize your thoughts and knowledge before the behavior takes place. So I wrote that here. I don't know if I worded this right. It's psychological is like the behavior. Neurological is, and I put this here, is how man views himself outside of himself and where he fits in the grand scheme of things. Possibly. That's why I put the question mark there. I don't really. This one was tough. It's noo or nous. This prefix there. Nou is a Greek term meaning mind. It's actually nous, with 2 dots over this last O right here. And then he goes on to talk about neurogenic neuroses. Neurogenic neuroses that do not emerge from conflicts between drives and instincts, but rather from existential problems. So again, neurological has to do with like existential thought, purpose, meaning. Psychological is from, I guess that's a good way to put it, drives and instincts. You know, pleasure, power, sex, etc. The emotional state of a person. I guess we just figured that out. But this was a tough question. I had to kind of think about this one and what I wanted to put for it. Guys, that is it. That was the last question for the discussion of pages 97 through 117. Again, we are going over next pages 118 to 134. That'll bring us to the end of chapter 2. So 118 to the end of chapter 2. Just as a little preview, I will probably do one more video for Man's Search for Meaning, because this is essentially, that's it. There's a postscript and then there's an afterword, and I might just combine that into one and just say, hey, we're doing one more video. We're doing one more video here. Might not even do a discussion. Maybe we'll just combine it all into one. But we will do a discussion for 118 through 134. And then I'm saying after that, we'll just have one big video for the rest of the book, postscript and afterward. But tune in next time as we talk about what we read, page 118 to the end of chapter 2. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. My name is Chris Lazar. This has been Chee-Tash, and I'll see you all next time.